Okay, so go to the website menti.com and then use this code and then just answer the question. Should schools return to in-person learning? And we'll get to everything in just a minute.
Is this referring to just like at all, or is there like a certain time frame that was intended?
Let's say beginning of March.
Okay.
So if you're just joining us, go ahead and do this online poll real fast. Okay, as you probably can tell, that's going to be our topic for today. Should schools return? Can the government make the schools return to in-person learning? So make sure you do that poll really fast. Now, as we're doing that, I'm going to bring this up, which is some extra credit that's available. Ms. J has put together 3 extra credit assignments for you here. Okay, these, we didn't put a point value on this. It depends on how much you do and how many of these you do. But this will be worth your while. Her extra credit she made here is going to take a little while to do. I have one that I put up here this morning. I found this app called Informable. It's a news literacy app, and I don't know if I should use it with students or not. So I'm asking you guys to be guinea pigs. You can download the app. It's on iOS or Android, and then just go through. And then I've got a just like 4 questions for you to answer, which are not about the news, but about the app. So kind of evaluating this to see if I can use it with my students. So there's a link to the app there, and then there's 4 questions I want you to answer. Okay, but that's not required. That's for bonus points. Okay, let me go back to the poll. All right, so majority of you say that no, we should not go back to in-person learning. Interesting. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through, and this will be our debate. And just like we've always done, guys will have time to work in a group, small group, and argue back and forth with each other or discuss this back and forth with each other. And then we will come back together as a class and figure out if your responses are still the same. Okay, so we'll come back to this in just a minute. All right. Now, we're going to take a look at whether or not the federal government should force schools to reopen to in-person learning. Share my screen here. Okay. All right. There we go. All right, there's our topic. All right, and so the issue is, I think the issue is, are schools safe for the return of students? And that's not only we're going to look at whether or not the federal government can say, go back to school, even those schools, and what schools do on a day-to-day basis. States determine that, not the federal government. But whether or not schools are safe for the return of students. Now, just a couple facts, because we always deal with the facts first. As of the 3rd week of January, this is a Center for Disease Control, the CDC, says that 58% of students were in districts with at least some in-person learning. And I got to tell you that our district is considered an in-person learning environment, because we have, I know you have the choice between learning from home or learning at school. And some of you are there at home, and some of you are here. Well, you're all at home today, but some of you are here in cohorts. We're considered in-person learning. Okay, so I don't want you to think in-person is, you know, your traditional classroom where you have 25 students in a room and a teacher and you discuss things and so forth. So their definition of an in-person learning environment is pretty broad. Okay, the CDC was very worried that opening schools to in-person learning would lead to spikes, big spikes in COVID-19. There was at the beginning of the school year, and then also during the holiday season, when and that had a lot to do with students not necessarily getting COVID in school, but getting COVID, you know, in their families and so forth during the holidays. So now I want to go over some CDC guidelines. On the 12th of this month, the Center for Disease Control put 4 categories together, and these are from the lowest risk to catching COVID to the highest risk. Okay, the lowest risk is when students and teachers are engaged in virtual only classes, activities, and events. That makes sense. There's no face-to-face contact. It's all done through the internet and computers. So there is really virtually no chance of spreading COVID. Some risk, though, is a hybrid learning model, where some students participate in virtual learning and some students engage in in-person learning. And this is what we do, obviously, but it could be if a school district does like A and B days. You know, on an A day, this group of students are here, and on B days, that the A group goes home and the B group comes in and so forth. So that fits this description. There's some risk. Small in-person classes, cohorting or alternating or staggering schedules. No mixing of groups and students and teachers throughout or across the school days. No sharing of objects between students and teachers. They are following steps to protect themselves, including face masks, social distancing, and hand hygiene. This sounds familiar, I'm sure. And then there's a regular and consistent schedule use of cleaning, which I can verify that that's happening at our school. When my cohort is not in my room, it's being sprayed with disinfectant. All right, now a higher risk where students and teachers engage entirely in in-person learning activities and events, with some mixing of groups and students throughout the school day. You got some sharing of objects, and students, staff, and teachers follow some steps to protect themselves: face masks, social distancing, and hand hygiene. Okay, so there's no disinfectant sprays. Then the highest risk is something along the lines of what we call a normal school day, with in-person learning, students switch classes, and students and staff do or are not follow protective guidelines. Okay, now the question then is, the CDC doesn't specifically recommend one of these models, but what do you think the CDC is recommending? I'll leave that as a rhetorical question, and I'll let you discuss that in your groups. Now, what changed everything was vaccines. Okay, and the President Biden said, I want most schools to reopen by my 100th day in office, and that his 100th day in office is April 30th, 2021. Okay, I want most schools. That's vague. Is that 51%? Is that 70%? The only specific thing is on his 100th day in office. So more and more schools are reopening. Okay, now, as always, let's look at the two sides. I've summarized some arguments for you. Let's go to against opening, since that's where it seems like most of you are. There are older schools, especially in inner cities, in big cities, that do not have proper ventilation systems. These ventilation systems must be updated to meet CDC guidelines for safe student-teacher interaction, and those schools don't have money for that. Okay, second point, some schools don't have the room to social distance. I'll use the example of Walnut Hills High School, which is in the City of Cincinnati School District. You all know Mr. Posta teaches here. His wife teaches at Walnut Hills High School, and his wife has told him that they are at 3 times the student capacity at the building. So they have 3 times as many students as the building is supposed to hold. In a normal school day, in non-pandemic situations, that's not a big deal. They figured out a schedule where they rotate teachers through different classes and so forth. And some of the teachers don't have a classroom, they travel. Okay. However, and by the way, Walnut Hills is completely 100% remote. And the reason I'm pointing out Walnut Hills is because the Governor DeWine, specifically mentioned 2 weeks ago, mentioned Walnut Hills High School and said they should open, and he specifically named the high school. Okay, but the reality is, if they open up, remember they're at 3 times their capacity. If they have to social distance, their principal studied this and said, if we did this, if we opened back up, because we are way above capacity, that in order to ensure social distancing, students would only be able to come in to the school 1 day a week, because normally where they would have 30 students in a classroom, they're down to a third capacity or a half capacity, 15. So they can't have all those students in at the same time in the same classroom. So they'll say, okay, this group of students come in Monday, this group comes in Tuesday, everybody else stays home on those days. This group comes in Wednesday, and so forth. Okay, now here's another point. Another true story. There were 2 wrestling tournaments in Florida. In these 2 different tournaments, 38 out of the 54 participants tested positive for COVID. Okay, so they tested them beforehand, and I mean, this is in the middle of the wrestling season, and some of them were carrying COVID. Actually, a majority of them carried COVID. Okay, if you're talking about coming back to school, some teachers and students have pre-existing health conditions or have family members that have compromised immune systems. What do you do to those teachers who, even though maybe they've been vaccinated, they have, some health problems, might be a respiratory problem or so forth, that if they do catch COVID, that it's going to, put them at the risk of dying. Same with students. Or if you're at school and then you come home to, your family on the weekends, what if you have some grandparents that fit that they have compromised immune systems, they fit that health description. And then this is a more specific thing here. Back in January, the Center for Disease Control did a survey. They found that 65% of students reported that fellow students wore a mask all the time. So 35% are not in the classroom and in hallways or in stairwells. 42% reported use on school buses, and 40% in the restrooms, and 36% in the cafeteria. So the bottom line is, unless they're in a classroom, majority of students are not wearing masks in these schools that they surveyed. Okay. All right. Now let's move on to in favor of opening. Lots of schools have been closed for almost a year, since March 2020. We've come back and we have this cohort system. There are lots of schools in the United States, 40% of them or so, that have been completely closed. They've done nothing but online learning since March 2020, which has led to a large social, emotional, and academic toll on students, especially kids in elementary school. Now, I don't need to explain this to you guys because you've all been through this. I mean, you or your friends or your siblings, I'm sure at some point have had some depression about, oh my gosh, I wish things would just be normal. I want to have a normal school day. I don't want to go out and risk, catching a life-threatening illness. And then not to mention, do you feel that you're academically progressing this year? Are you just going from activity to activity and you're so busy you really don't have time to, quote unquote, learn? Here's another argument in favor of opening. Schools that have opened have not been hotspots. This is from the Journal of the American Medical Association. Unlike bars and restaurants, we've opened up bars and restaurants. They're not at 100% capacity. I've seen restaurants and I've seen bars where they're violating that left and right. I just don't go in those places. But schools have not been those kind of hotspots. Why? Because schools are taking a lot of precautions that a lot of other places are not, including, sanitizing and so forth. Okay. Teachers are being prioritized for vaccines. Ohio has done this. Every teacher in the Northwest Local School District that wanted a vaccine has gotten their first round of vaccines. And then next week or the week after, we're going to get round 2. Okay. So us being around all kinds of different students, we are at much less of a risk at catching COVID with these vaccines. And then finally, parents have struggled with childcare. Your families may have come across this where, not they necessarily have to watch you guys, you're high schoolers, you're pretty close to being adults. But what about if you have brothers and sisters that are in kindergarten or first grade or second grade? What do you do for childcare for, months and months at a time? Okay, so a lot of parents are saying, open up schools, not because they want a babysitter, but that's a lot less that they have to worry about. And, they're worried about their kids' academic progress as well. Okay. Does anybody have any questions before I send you guys to your breakout rooms about this?
No.
Everybody's good?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Okay, I'm going to make 4 breakout rooms. Go to the document on Classroom, and then, in your group, argue back and forth on this. Should we or should we not open schools? Looking at the facts and then the arguments that I presented to you. Or you can even come up, of course, with some of your own. All right, you should be getting a message to go to your breakout rooms.
I think it's pretty important to keep schools closed for now.
Okay.
Because you can amass a bunch of reasons to open them. But in reality, if we do open them and then that leads to a spike, particularly before students get the vaccine, then that has a chance of leading to an increase of COVID cases, which leads to death. And, you know, leaving them closed isn't going to kill anyone. It might cause, you know, some parents to need to stay home and potentially another stimulus check to need to be passed. But in the end, having people stay home isn't going to kill anyone.
What if schools gave the option of like we did at the beginning of the year and have continually all year, that you can either learn in person or learn remotely?
I think that's, you know, I think that is what the system that we have now is sort of what I was advocating for, because if say you have, you know, constant contact with someone who is in the high risk demographic, whether their you know, immune system is compromised or they're the elderly, you know, I think you should advocate for staying home. But then if you really have nothing to worry about and if your parents need to send you to school, then that should remain an option with heavy restrictions in place.
Okay. All right, because I'm going to put the poll back up here so more of you can take that. The poll part 2. It's the same question as it was earlier. Let me share that again. And we can keep talking over the top of this. Okay, so let me throw something else out there, which is when I say we, I mean Northwest High School and Colerain High School are changing their in-person learning modules starting probably the beginning of 4th quarter. So what'll happen is you guys will, instead of staying in one cohort, we'll have A and B days. You'll go to half your classes on one day and half your classes on the next. That doesn't mean everybody's returning to school. What that means is and your parents are going to get information about this today. You know, if students are at home, they can stay at home, or, you know, we're welcoming them back if they feel safer to come back to school. But you'll be actually following your schedule. They're going to be about 55-minute classes. And then you'll have cohort time during the day as well. Wednesdays will stay the same. Wednesdays will still be remote learning like we have now, Zoom meetings. I don't know. How do you feel about that? Do you feel safer or unsafer? Tell me what you think.
I think socially it's a good idea. And like pertaining to schoolwork and stuff, I think it's a good idea. But, you know, you can't really tell how that would work with Corona until you actually do it.
Okay. How do you think that would enhance academics?
Well, I know I personally stopped doing it at school because we didn't change classes. I hated staying in one class the whole entire time. I felt cramped and I wasn't able to get any work done. So that's why I came home. But at home, I'm not able to focus because I don't have there's no structure and no schedule. And it's harder to enforce a schedule on myself than it is when I have multiple people around me doing it with me. We'll also have more opportunity to talk to teachers. It's nice emailing, and that's okay. Like, we can email, but they aren't going to get back to us right away. And things can't always be conveyed through like emails that they can through speech.
Yeah, nothing beats face-to-face conversation, especially when a student has questions about an assignment. You know, they might have a follow-up question or so forth. So do you think that you would return, those of you that are at home, do you think you would return in this new model, or would you stay home?
I would return.
You would return? Okay.
Or like, are you asking for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so this would basically be 4th quarter. This is how 4th quarter is going to go.
I would definitely stay home.
You would definitely stay home?
Yeah.
Olivia, you're at home right now, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. Why would you want to stay home?
Because people do not care enough like about keeping others healthy, and it's way too risky. I was born early. I have like a horrible immune system. My grandparents are really old. My grandpa has half a lung, and like people don't care because they'll be okay, so they accidentally spread it and it hurts people. And I think we are advanced in technology far enough to where we should be able to communicate with each other, or we can communicate with each other like decently, and we shouldn't have to jeopardize lives.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia, for that. You and your family have some very extenuating circumstances. And I tend to agree with you that I have little faith in my fellow mankind. Not, of course, you guys. You guys are all really smart. But I work out at Planet Fitness, and Planet Fitness that I go to has 2 stairwells, one in the front of the gym, one in the back, and they're clearly marked one way. You go up one set of stairs, you go down another set of stairs. You know how many times I've seen people go up the downstairs and vice versa? I'm like, and there's a giant sign on the floor, you cannot miss it. Unless you're texting on your phone,
That's
you
what I
cannot
mean.
miss it. Go ahead.
People like what they're told.
Yeah, I agree. Morgan, were you going to say something? You're unmuted there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I forgot what I was about to say. Yeah, I totally forgot. Sorry.
That's okay. That happens when you get old.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jamie.
With the A and B schedule, would it be possible for students to go in for only like one of their classes that they struggle with? So like if they're doing well online for all of their classes, but they really want to go in for one specific class, would that be possible?
That's a good question. I will ask that tomorrow. We have an all teacher meeting tomorrow. That's that hasn't been thought of before. That's a great question. I'll bring that up.
That would help limit the thing. And if multiple students are like, I just want to go in for like math or something, then you have a day where it's for like the math students or the English students.
Yeah, the classes that are harder to teach remotely than say social studies.
Right.
I just remembered what I was about to say.
Okay, go ahead, Morgan.
So I think if we were, well, I'm pretty sure we're going to go through with the whole 4th quarter thing. I think I would most likely want to switch to remote if we did that.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't really do well with like the in person because I feel like teachers, not saying you in particular, but a lot of teachers, like they have a set, like, we're going to finish all this by this day. You're going to test on this day, then this and this and this. And I feel like now it's like, okay, we're going to learn this for like a week and then we'll possibly have a test on this day or this day. But I just want you guys to get comfortable with the subject. I'd rather do that than just have all the work just thrown in my face and say, remember all this stuff and then take this test. So I think I would rather do it at home.
You can self-pace it a little more at home than you would at school.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have anything they want to add? Very good conversation today. Very good. As always, though, you guys always have good conversations. Okay, what I need to do is send you guys, we're a couple minutes over, I need to send you guys to your next class. Don't forget the bonus assignments. Ms. J has put a lot of time into the bonus assignments, and I can tell you they're really good. You'll be able to express yourself politically in several ways. So, and if you feel like checking out that app that I have on there, go ahead and do that, and then just report out. You can do both assignments if you want. Okay. All right.